So now let's talk about front-end, back-end, and full-stack development. So you've probably heard these terms before, but they might be a little bit confusing to you if you're new to the coding world. So one of the big things that I want to keep reinforcing to you is that when you build a project, you are not going to be simply using one language or one technology. You're going to be having a lot of technologies and a lot of languages come together to create your finished project. Again, even when we're creating simple things here for Silicon Dojo, you have HTML, you have CSS, and you have JavaScript that is on the front end that will communicate back to a server, that will have Python, what's called a back-end programming language, we'll have a framework, we'll have a database system, and we'll have a whole bunch of other things, including things such as the Linux operating system. So in order to build a full-fledged product, even a relatively small one, you're going to need a lot of different components. The issue becomes as you start to create a larger and larger product and you need more people to help support the product, you are going to have to divide tasks to different people, right? So when you just have a small little product you're building in your own basement, you can probably do everything yourself. You're doing the HTML, you're doing the CSS, you're doing the Python, you're doing the database, that's it. The issue is let's just say your product actually becomes successful and you become the next Airbnb or Netflix or something like that. At some point, the project is going to grow to such a degree that you're going to need people to focus on certain aspects to make sure those particular aspects are optimized for the overall experience of your users. And so when we talk about front-end developers and back-end developers and full-stack developers, basically what we're talking about here is people that are specialized in different areas of what is called the stack. So we've talked about tech stacks before. Again, that's all the technology that's related to your overall product. So if you're thinking about something like a front-end developer, they are going to be focusing on everything that the user to your application sees. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, front-end frameworks such as React and Flutter. Basically, whatever the user is interacting with, they're going to be the ones that are focused on that, and they become specialized in that. Then you have the back-end developers. The back-end developers are going to be dealing with anything that's coming in from the user. So once the user has input something into the system, that then comes into the back-end, that comes into the server, and the server has to process that information and do something with the information. Well, a back-end developer is going to create all the code for how to process that information and then how to store that information or do something with it. On the same hand, if the user requests information, requests reports or something like that, the back-end developer is going to come up with a system for being able to grab whatever information out of a database, something like that, and then be able to send it to the front end. The front-end developer will then format what that information comes into the user to make it look pretty. When you start thinking about a full stack developer is somebody that understands the entire stack for your project. So they understand the JavaScript, they understand CSS or Tailwind if you use it, they understand the backend programming language, Python, Ruby on Rails, PHP, C#, whatever else. They understand the database language, again, SQL or something along those lines, and they will most likely understand the operating system that everything is running on, or the platform that everything is running on. So they have a full idea of how everything comes together in order to make the project work. So when we're talking about a front-end developer, that is the person that deals with basically whatever the user is interacting with. A back-end developer is basically dealing with all of the systems, again, things like API calls, database calls, processing data, that type of thing. And then the full stack developer actually deals with everything, everything from the operating system all the way up to the HTML. So let's use my whiteboard to draw this out so you get a better idea of where you may want to focus in the tech stack as you go forward with your career in coding, right? So basically, let's say here we have a server, so we have a web server, and then out here we have the user, and they're going to be interacting with the web server to get the website, the web application, that type of deal. So basically, everything that the user is going to be interacting with is going to be designed by the front-end developer. Basically, everything going on the server side is going to be the back-end developer. So this is where things like API calls will happen. This is where the SQL statement, the database connections will happen. This is where you'll be dealing with files and folders on the operating system. That will be over on the back end. So one of the interesting things when we start talking about, front-end development and back-end development is one of the things we have to consider is essentially how can we offload resource consumption as much as possible to our end user, right? Especially when you have a site or when you have a service that a lot of people are going to be interacting with, thousands a day, tens of thousands a day, hundreds of thousands of people a day. Remember, every time somebody interacts with your server, that is going to consume RAM, it's going to consume CPU, it's going to consume bandwidth, a whole bunch of other things, right? So the more that your server has to process everything, the more load there will be on the server, and there's hardware and there's other kinds of costs there. So one of the things we really have to consider is, hey, can we send our workload over to our user? So instead of burning our resources, we get to burn their resources. And that's the idea behind a programming language called JavaScript, you should have heard of, is basically JavaScript is a front-end programming language that basically is in the web browser. So when you're using Safari, Google Chrome, Firefox, that type of thing, what happens with JavaScript is the server actually just sends text. It literally sends text to the user. That text is a JavaScript script, and what happens is the user's computer turns this text into the actual little application that the person is dealing with, and all of the processing then happens on their system. So that is one way that we can send basically all the work over to the user, and we don't have to burn our own resources doing that. This can also be true for things like iOS apps or Android apps, that type of thing. You have an app on the user's system, basically on the user's smartphone. Basically, if you can get that app to do most of the processing, that means that processing goes from your back-end server to the app. The smartphone does the processing, and therefore you don't need to consume as many resources on your own internal infrastructure. So basically, when we're looking at the front end, right? So this is going to be building the application itself. What does the application look like, right? Things like the JavaScript, being able to send text to the front end and turn that into different functionality, within that application on the front end. It'll be things like CSS, making the front end looked pretty, and that type of deal. So basically, when we're talking about the front end, this is what we're talking about. Now, the issue is you'll notice here that I said sending text to the end user. So when we send text to the end user, it is text. It is just simply ASCII text or UTF-8 text, right? And basically anybody can read it. It can get cached. You can look at the source and see exactly what's there. So if you have personally identifiable information, or if you have any kind of information that you do not want the user to see, the user should not see that information. You don't want to send it in JavaScript, because you can create a JavaScript app that won't display the text, but the web browser still got the text. So you can simply go into see source and see everything that got sent to you. So that's where the backend developer comes in. So again, using a program language such as Python, what we do here is when the user makes the request to our system, our Python script, again, will go to the database or the files or the API, that type of thing, and it will select only the information that's important, right? So it will not get the person's social security number, it will not get their phone number, it won't get any additional information the end user doesn't need. It will only get the specific data that the user needs. That will all get bundled up. That will then get sent to the front end so that it can be displayed again with a programming language like JavaScript. And so this is where we look at the back end. So the back end is going to be where any of the secure processing is going to need to happen. Again, connecting to the database. So the database is going to have all of your records for your application. Again, usernames, passwords, any email addresses, phone numbers, all of that kind of stuff. So basically your Python script will be able to go there, be able to pick up the specific information that you want before it gets sent off. Again, it can make the API calls, and basically that is where the back end is going to be. Now, again, we've talked about before with the whole idea of full stack developer, right? So a full stack developer is basically somebody that can do both, right? And a little bit more. So you have the user here, and so they can code in JavaScript, and they can code in CSS, and they can code in HTML, they can code in Tailwind, and they can code in React, maybe they can code in Flutter. All right, so these are all things that go along with front end. And then you have the back end over here. So this is your server. So they probably know Python, and they know SQL, and they understand how to connect to APIs and a whole bunch of other things. But one of the things to consider too is that this will be in your overall infrastructure, right? And so you'll have things like the operating system. So all of your code here on the back end many times will be running on Linux. So in the 2020s, it'll be running on Linux. It might also be running on something called PaaS or as. This is called Platform as a Service or Infrastructure as a Service. And basically a full stack developer will understand the front end, they'll understand the back end, and they'll understand the platform or operating system that all of this is running on, so that they have a full idea and full grasp of how your entire platform works. Now the question I know you're going to ask me is, okay, Eli, which one should I be? And the answer, as I'll always give you, is Butterbrickle. Butterbrickle. I get these questions from people, and it's like, whatever you want to do. You can make a lot of money, and you can be very successful knowing JavaScript and React and doing the front end stuff. You can be very successful and make a lot of money doing the back end stuff. You can be very successful and make a lot of money doing the full stack stuff. So what is it you should do? Basically, it's one of those things you have to look at the person in the mirror and ask yourself, what do you feel most comfortable with? If you want to interact with the end user, all right. It's like garlic to vampires. End users, no, right? Well, one of the things you have to be thinking about is when you're programming, right? When you're creating these projects, is you're going to have to be interacting with the vested interests of these projects, right? And the vested interest is basically whoever the final product is going to be valuable for. So again, if you're going to be creating that front end user interface, you're going to have to be interacting with the users, the secretaries and the warehouse workers and the CEOs and the marketing people and the lawyers, right? Basically to figure out what the hell it is that they like and they want, right? So that's one of the things to be thinking about with the front end is how much do you really want to deal with the end users? When you think about the back end, basically with that, you're going to be dealing much more with the whole infrastructure. And so you're going to be dealing much more with geeks. And let's be honest, that can either be a good or a bad thing, depending on what company you're in and what culture you have, right? If all you're doing all day is basically having to interact with the database server administrators and the systems administrators and all of those types of people, that can be a wee bit frustrating too, right? So that's one of the things you have to think about is basically, who do you want to be interacting with? When you're looking at the full stack developer, they're basically dealing with everybody from the front end to the executive to the database administrators and all of those types of people. So that's one of the things to consider. And then past that, again, basically with programming languages, it's what programming language do you have an affinity for? As I've talked about, I like Python. I sit down, I write Python. Python makes a lot of sense to me. It just does. I sit down, I try to write JavaScript. Don't get me wrong, I get it. I get JavaScript. I don't know what it is. JavaScript makes my teeth itch. It just does. I'm not saying JavaScript is a bad language. I'm just saying, to me, I hate JavaScript. It's just kind of one of those things. And that's going to be one of the things that you need to think about too, is again, when you're sitting down and you're coding certain languages, It's just going to be relatively easy, even if you don't understand it, even if you have to learn, right? There are certain things you do in life where you're like, oh, this is hard, but I know I can get it, right? You know how you feel there? And there's other things in life where you're like, this is hard, and I'm pretty sure it's always going to suck. Right? So that's going to be one of the other considerations, is that type of thing there. At the end of the day, one of the things I would really have you think about, though, is that at least at some level, you should be a full stack developer. You don't have to be a great full stack developer. An adequate full stack developer will do. One of the big problems I see with people that are deploying projects in the modern world is people have become hyper-focused. So for my generation, I got my MCSE back in 2000, we were supposed to know everything. Fix it. Just go, fix it. What's it? I don't know, it, right? Anyways, time's gone by, it's been 25 years, and so people have become much more focused, right? I do this, and I do this, and I do this. One of the problems that you run into is if all you, like literally all you know is whatever your little niche is, when you need to interact with other people on your team or with people in other departments or other teams, if you have no idea what their language does, what the problems are, the quirks are with their language, when you try to come together to make sure, you know, all of your components, you know, work properly, that is probably going to be a difficult time, right? Because again, every language has their quirks. Every language is good for certain things and bad for others. So if you don't understand what the other people are dealing with, you're going to come in and you're going to say, just do it. And they're going to be like, it doesn't just do that. You're like, well, my language does, so your language should too. And it's like, that's not how technology works. And then it just gets into a bit of a screaming fest. So one of the things to be thinking about is if you're a bit of a full stack developer, even a adequate full stack developer, you understand what the concerns are for the other folks. The other thing, especially in a job market that might be getting quirky or interesting, right? If you're a full stack developer, you are more likely to be able to build an overall product. If you need to go out and you need to become a consultant, if you need to basically go on your own or make a little money on the side, if you can do everything, if you know everything from the operating system all the way up to JavaScript, even to just an adequate degree, that means you can go out and you can actually sell a product, right? I can build a little CRM solution for your company. I can build a work order system for your company. I can build this app solution for your company, which again, you know, coders make anywhere between $100 to $300 an hour consulting. So even, you know, 10 hours a week doing that, that could be quite a bit of extra money. That's just a side gig. And that's something that's a lot easier to do if you understand the full stack. So anyways, I hope that makes sense for you. So the full stack is going to be, or the front end is going to be everybody who deals with basically what the user is interacting with. The back end is going to be dealing with the infrastructure, the architecture, basically, again, the Python language, PHP, C#, things like that, going to be dealing with databases, that type of deal, and the full stack developer is going to be dealing with everything. Yeah,